Usually when we think about picking up a camera, there's this underlying assumption of control.
Right.
It's almost like you're a hunter, carrying a net, you see a beautiful sunset, or maybe your family's smiling perfectly at some reunion, and you frame it up. You click the shutter, and boom, you capture exactly the reality you wanted to preserve.
Yeah, it's like an act of validation. We naturally want the world to be organized. We want it curated.
Exactly.
We want the photograph to
Yeah.
prove that the reality we are actively trying to construct, like the happy family or the perfect vacation, that it actually exists.
But then you step into the world of Diane Arbus, and suddenly that neat little camera is no longer a net catching butterflies.
Not at all.
It's a scalpel. Or, maybe a mirror angle to show you the exact thing you were desperately trying to hide. We're looking at a photographic landscape today that is completely unnerving because it's the absolute definition of psychological exposure.
It really is. It strips away every ounce of that safe, curated image you were talking about. And, that is exactly our mission today. We are exploring how Diane Arbus turned the camera into a tool to dissect the human soul.
Which is just a massive topic.
It is. We are pulling this from an incredible stack of sources, primarily excerpts from an Aperture Monograph that covers her life, her writings, and obviously her monumental body of work.
So our goal here, whether you are, a seasoned photographer looking to hone your craft, or someone who just bought their first digital camera, or honestly just a person who observes humanity on your morning commute, our goal is to extract her core artistic philosophy.
Right.
We're going to explore her entirely unique way of collaborating with the people she photographed, plus her radical technical evolution, and of course, the captivating kind of uncomfortable power of her imagery.
And to really grasp the weight of what she accomplished, I think we first need to understand the environment she was reacting against. Because Diane Arbus wasn't born into that gritty, struggling artist stereotype.
It's far from it.
Exactly. She was born in New York City in 1923 into profound, really insulated wealth. Her father, David Nemiroff, owned Russik's, which is a massive, prominent Fifth Avenue department store.
Right, which means she grew up surrounded by the ultimate mechanisms of the fake front.
Yes.
Velvet ropes, window displays, fur coats, the mannequins. She lived inside a machine designed to project an illusion of flawless, upper-class perfection.
Precisely. She attended elite schools, lived on Central Park West, and was completely sheltered from the harsh realities of the Depression era that was happening right outside.
Wow.
And at the incredibly young age of 14, she met Alan Arbus, whom she married 4 years later. For a long time, they were a professional team.
They were fashion photographers, right?
Yeah, they became fashion photographers. Throughout the 1940s and 50s, they worked for major fashion magazines in the U.S., actively creating those highly produced, polished illusions of beauty that she'd grown up around.
So she spent years literally manufacturing the guys, like lighting models, arranging garments, creating a fantasy, which really makes her eventual pivot so dramatic.
Oh, it's a huge pivot. The major shift happens around 1959. She starts studying photography with Lisette Model.
Oh, right.
And Model was an incredibly bold photographer, known for her unsparing close-up street portraits. She essentially gave Arbus the psychological license to stop creating illusions and just seriously pursue her own raw vision.
And from there, her acceleration is staggering, isn't it?
It really is. She earns Guggenheim Fellowships in 1963 and 1966.
And then comes 1967, which is a watershed moment, not just for her, but, for the entire history of photography.
Absolutely.
Because John Czerkowski, who was the legendary director of photography at the Museum of Modern Art, which at the time was basically the Supreme Court of the art world, he includes her in a show called New Documents.
Right. That exhibition was the establishment finally validating a completely new way of seeing. She received widespread acclaim. Her photographs were instantly recognized as culturally vital, and they entered permanent collections all over the world.
But then, tragically, she committed suicide in 1971.
Yes. And the following year, she became the first American photographer to be exhibited at the Venice Biennale.
Okay, let's unpack this history a bit, because the fascinating paradox sitting right in the middle of all this is that Arbus wasn't trying to buttress some academic theory.
No. not at all.
The monograph explicitly notes she wasn't a theorist writing grand philosophical manifestos. She just wanted to make pictures of what she actually saw.
Yeah, she was incredibly instinctual.
Right. But by simply pointing her lens at the things she found genuinely interesting, she ended up entirely rewriting the rules of what a photograph could do.
She wasn't tearing down the establishment on purpose. She was just looking in a completely different direction. And by looking elsewhere, she redefined the very foundation of documentary photography.
Which brings us to what Zarkowski observed, right?
Exactly. John Zarkowski observed something incredibly sharp about this transition. He pointed out that traditional documentary photography, up to that point, rested on an assumption of temporal social realities.
Let's clarify that for everyone. When we think of documentary photography from that era, we usually think of someone like Dorothea Lange capturing migrant mothers during the Dust Bowl.
Right. Or photojournalists covering a war zone.
Exactly. It's about taking the temperature of society. It's what is happening out in the open, impacting the masses at a specific time.
But Zarkowski notes that Arbus's work abandons that entirely. She isn't concerned with social realities in that broad sense. She's concerned with private realities.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, she shifted the focus from visual coherence, like what a scene looks like, to psychological coherence, what a person feels like. She was looking at the prototypical and the mythic, rather than just the news of the day.
So her real subject is the unique interior lives of those she photographed.
Oh, less than that, yes.
So if traditional documentary photography tells you what is happening in the world, like here is a protest or here is poverty, Arbus's photography tells you what it feels like inside a single, intensely unique human being. She's documenting a soul, not an event.
And that transition from the exterior event to the interior state is it's jarring for the viewer. It's what prompted the famous art critic Hilton Kramer to make a vital observation.
What did he say?
He admitted that standing in front of her work, you are hit by something, quote, extremely powerful and very strange.
Strange is a good word for it.
But he points to a specific mechanical reason why it feels so strange. He notes that in her pictures, nothing is improvised or merely caught.
Wait, this is a huge distinction for anyone who takes portraits. Think of the quintessential street photographer, someone like Henri Cartier-Bresson.
The decisive moment.
Yeah, they hide in the shadows, waiting for that decisive moment, snapping the picture before the subject even realizes a camera is there. But Arbus completely rejects that stealthy approach.
Completely. Kramer says her subjects face the camera with interest and patience. They're fully aware of the picture-making process. They're actually collaborating with her.
Collaborating?
Yes. And Kramer argues that this suggestion of a dialogue between the subject and the photographer is what gives these pictures a great dignity. And that dignity is the true source of their power.
Okay, wait. I have to push back on this a little bit because there feels like a massive psychological contradiction here.
How so?
Well, think about human nature. When I know a camera is pointed at me, my immediate involuntary instinct is to freeze.
Sure.
I suck in my stomach, I fix my posture, I plaster on a totally unnatural smile. If her subjects are fully aware and collaborate, like literally giving them time to prepare for the shot, doesn't that mean they are actively putting up a fake front?
That's the logical assumption, yes.
So how does giving someone time to pose lead to some raw, deep truth, rather than just a highly staged fiction?
It's a great question. And that contradiction is the exact mechanism that makes her work genius? Yes. Because she didn't want to capture people unaware. Catching someone mid-blink or mid-step, that's just a fleeting physical accident. She actually wanted them to put up that fake front.
She wanted the mass. She says, our whole guise is like giving a sign to the world to think of us in a certain way. But there's a point between what you want people to know about you and what you can't help people knowing about you.
And she explicitly calls that the gap between intention and effect.
It's brilliant.
The psychology she is breaking down here applies to every single person listening to this deep dive.
Yeah.
Every day, we put on a costume.
We definitely do.
We choose specific clothes. We adopt a certain posture. We curate our vocabulary. We have a clear intention like, I want the world to see me as successful, or I want to be seen as tough.
Right.
But Arbus observed that the camera, when used with enough patience, captures the exact moment that intention fractures.
The best analogy I can think of for this mechanism is think about when you dress up for a really high-stakes job interview.
Oh, that's perfect.
You put on a perfectly tailored dark navy suit. You intend to project absolutely flawless, cool, unflappable professionalism.
The total package.
Yeah. But you're sitting in the waiting room. And your white-knuckled grip on your leather portfolio. Or maybe that tiny, nervous, twitchy smile you get to the receptionist that reveals your sheer, unadulterated terror.
Right.
The intention is professional mastery, but the effect is raw, naked vulnerability. Arbus isn't pointing her lens at the cut of your suit. She is pointing her lens right at the twitch.
Exactly. The camera captures the sweat on the brow, not the polish on the shoes. She explicitly noted that when you see someone on the street, what you fundamentally notice about them is the flaw.
It's what makes us human.
She found it fantastic that we look the way we do, with all our inherent ironies.
Mm.
She wrote that something is ironic in the world, and it has to do with the fact that what you intend never comes out like you intended.
And that hyper-focus on the highly specific flaw, like the exact nature of the twitch, is what makes her work resonate so universally today. But what's crazy is that early on in her career, she actually held the exact opposite theory about how to connect with an audience.
She did, yeah. It's funny to look back on. She talks about how when she first began, she looked at the sheer volume of people in the world and thought it would be impossible to photograph them all.
Which is fair.
So her logical assumption was, if I photograph some kind of generalized human being, everybody will recognize it.
She was aiming for the archetypal common man.
Right.
Which, I mean, it sounds like completely sound logic. Keep the art vague so everyone can project their own experiences onto it, like reading a daily horoscope.
It does make sense on paper. But her teacher, Lisette Model, completely shattered that misconception. Model gave her a piece of advice that fundamentally altered her trajectory.
And what was that?
She told her, the more specific you are, the more general it'll be.
The more specific you are, the more general it'll be. That is a profound philosophical anchor for any artist, writer, or creator listening.
It really is the ultimate paradox of artistic resonance. Because if you set out to paint a picture of, generalized universal human sadness, you'll almost certainly end up with a melodramatic cliché.
Right, it'll look like a stock photo.
Exactly. But if you paint the exact, highly specific way an old man holds a ceramic coffee cup with trembling hands in a diner at 3 a.m., suddenly the entire world recognizes the sorrow.
It pierces right through.
Arbus realized she had to face the uncompromising specific reality of her subjects head-on. She wrote that there are certain evasions, certain nicenesses that I think you have to get out of.
She calls the photographic process a kind of exactitude, a level of scrutiny that we normally never subject each other to in polite society.
We look away.
Yeah, we look away. She says we're nicer to each other than the intervention of the camera is going to make us. It's a little bit cold, a little bit harsh. By refusing to evade the facts, she was naturally drawn to people who had nowhere to hide.
Which brings us to her most debated and arguably her most empathetic subjects.
The ones she called freaks.
Yes, the individuals she openly referred to in her writings as freaks. Now, we need to be clear here. In today's context, that word lands with an incredibly harsh, pejorative sting. It's highly offensive. But in her era, and specifically within her personal vocabulary, it carried a totally different weight. She didn't use it as an insult at all. She used it almost as a title of nobility.
She was magnetically drawn to people on the extreme margins of society. She said that photographing them had a terrific kind of excitement for her, and she even admitted to feeling a complex mixture of shame and awe in their presence.
Awe is the key word there.
Yeah. She saw a quality of legend about them. She compared them to a character in a fairy tale who stops you on your path and demands that you answer a riddle.
Her analysis of why she felt this awe provides one of the most stunning quotes in the entire monograph.
It's incredible.
She says, most people go through life dreading they'll have a traumatic experience. Freaks were born with their trauma. They've already passed their test in life. They're aristocrats.
They're aristocrats. I just want to let the mechanics of that statement sink in for a second.
It's deep.
Everyone else, the people shopping on Fifth Avenue, the executives in the tailored suits, they're walking around in a constant low-level state of anxiety. They're terrified that some horrible thing is going to happen to them.
Terrified that their mask is going to slip and expose their flaws.
Yes. But these marginalized individuals, because of their stark physical realities, they have lived their entire lives without the luxury of a mask. The worst has already happened to them.
Their trauma is literally their starting point.
Exactly. By framing them as aristocrats, Arbus is completely upending the societal hierarchy of the time.
She really is. Because mainstream 1960s culture deemed these individuals outcasts or unfortunates. But Arbus elevates them to the highest possible psychological status.
Because they possess a bravery and an authenticity that the average person completely lacks.
Right. The average person is terrified of looking foolish. These subjects have a profound power granted by their absolute inability to be anything other than exactly what they are.
You can see this power radiating from the specific photographs mentioned in the text.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, look at the image of the Russian midget friends in a living room on 100th Street. That's from 1963. They are sitting there, completely grounded, commanding the space of this dark, heavy, ornate room with total authority.
They own the room.
Or the albino sword swallower at a carnival in Maryland in 1970. The subject is standing outside the tent, arms outstretched, head thrown back in a posture of total surreal surrender.
Beautiful.
Or the transvestite with torn stocking in New York City from 1966. The subject is sitting in this incredibly cluttered room, staring straight down the barrel of the lens. There is zero evasion in that gaze.
None at all. And to capture that level of uncompromising reality, Arbus had to adopt a very specific physical and emotional methodology.
She had to change how she worked.
She famously explained her process by saying, "I work from awkwardness."
Yeah.
And she clarified, by that I mean, I don't like to arrange things. If I stand in front of something, instead of arranging it, I arrange myself.
Think about how radical that is for a photographer.
Mm-hmm.
She isn't acting like a film director on a set. She isn't saying, okay, move your chin to the left, look a little more wistful, step into the light over by the window.
Not at all.
She recognizes that the subject's reality is already perfect in its unique strangeness. If the composition feels wrong or uncomfortable, she is the one who needs to move.
She adapts to them.
She needs to crouch on the floor, or step awkwardly into a corner, or just sit in the heavy silence until the image reveals itself.
And that willingness to sit in the discomfort, to literally arrange herself around the awkwardness of the world, it required immense emotional endurance.
It must have been exhausting.
Truly. She wasn't just photographing people she comfortably related to. She actively sought out territories where she felt completely alien.
Oh, right. There is a remarkable story she tells about working in Washington Square Park around 1966.
That's a perfect example.
She describes the park as this complex, highly guarded ecosystem. It was like a sunburst of walks, she said, and each path was staked out by a different group.
It was very territorial.
Very. You had young hippie junkies holding down one row. You had what she called really tough, amazingly hardcore lesbians occupying another row, and right in the middle, navigating the space between them, were the winos.
She explicitly noted the rigid hierarchy of this space. Girls coming down from the Bronx who wanted to be part of the bohemian hippie scene would have to carefully navigate through these different echelons.
Like running a gauntlet.
Exactly. It was dangerous, it was territorial, and it was entirely closed off to outsiders.
And Arbus admits she was terrified. She found the environment intensely scary. She realized, I could become a nudist, I could become a million things, but I could never become that, whatever all those people were.
She recognized an insurmountable boundary between her privileged Fifth Avenue background and their lived reality on the street.
But the incredible part is she didn't retreat. She hung around constantly. There were days she couldn't work at all and days she could. She just stayed in the awkwardness, enduring the discomfort until she finally earned the right to ask to photograph them.
Which highlights her complex, incredibly astute understanding of the camera itself.
How so?
She viewed the camera as both a physical barrier and a psychological bridge. She acknowledged that if she were just a curious woman walking up to a stranger in the park saying, "Hey, I want to come to your house and have you tell me the story of your life,"
People would call her crazy.
exactly, they would immediately put up their guard.
Absolutely. If someone approached me like that today, I'd cross the street. But she says the camera acts as a kind of license.
A nuisance, but a license.
Yeah.
Because as she profoundly observed, deep down, a lot of people actually want to be paid that much attention.
Wow, that's true.
When you have a camera, it validates their existence. It transforms an invasive interrogation into a reasonable kind of attention to be paid.
So the camera gave her the tangible excuse to cross societal boundaries that are otherwise strictly enforced.
Yes, exactly.
But crossing those boundaries and wanting to expose the absolute, unvarnished truth of these individuals meant her tools had to change.
They did.
If you were trying to capture the exact specific nature of a person's flaw, like the tension in their jaw or the specific way a stocking is torn, you can't rely on atmospheric tricks.
No, her philosophical journey from capturing the generalized common man to exposing the highly specific individual, It was perfectly mirrored by a radical shift in her darkroom technique and her aesthetic choices.
For the photography enthusiasts out there, this technical evolution is really fascinating. Arbus confesses that in the beginning of her career, she used to make very grainy images.
Right, she loved the grain.
She was enamored with what the film grain did to a picture. She said it created a kind of tapestry of all these little dots.
And in that grainy tapestry, everything is equalized. As she put it, skin becomes the same as water, which becomes the same as the sky.
It all blends together.
Everything is translated into this uniform, impressionistic medium of light and dark rather than actual flesh and blood. That style, often called pictorialism, is inherently romantic. It softens the edges of reality.
It's the visual equivalent of listening to a symphony through a thick wall. All the harsh notes are muffled, and it just sounds like a pleasant, romantic hum.
That's a great way to describe it.
But eventually, that hum bored her to death. She hated the idea of a picture being considered interesting simply because it showed texture. She explicitly states, "I don't see what's interesting about texture. It really bores the hell out of me."
What she desperately wanted to see were the real, tangible differences in the world.
The facts.
Yes. She wanted to show the density of human flesh versus the material of a dress. She wanted to capture the stark difference between empty air and a shiny surface.
So she had to learn entirely different darkroom techniques to achieve this. She says she became terribly hyped on clarity.
Hyped on clarity, you could see exactly why she had to make that shift. If your entire artistic philosophy rests on dissecting the fake front, if you want to show the exact gap between intention and effect, you cannot hide those details in a blurry romantic fog.
Soft focus helps the subject maintain their guise. Clarity is the ultimate betrayal of the guise.
Clarity became her truth serum.
And this obsession with clarity ties directly into her fundamental belief about the medium of photography itself. She drew a hard, unyielding line between photography and film.
She stated, "It's always seemed to me that photography tends to deal with facts, whereas film tends to deal with fiction."
Her logic here is brilliant. She says when you go to the movies and you see two people in a bedroom, you're perfectly willing to suspend disbelief.
You know it's fake.
Right. You know it's an illusion. You know there is a director, a boom operator, and a whole crew of lighting technicians standing just off screen. It is an agreed-upon fiction.
But a photograph, she argues, is an inescapable fact. When you look at a photograph, you can never put aside the reality that the photographer was actually there,
Physically present in the room.
breathing the same air as the subject. The photograph is an undeniable, factual record of an encounter.
She tells an incredibly poignant anecdote to illustrate the weight of this factual reality. She mentions a sex worker she once knew who showed her a photo album.
Oh, right, the Instamatic album.
Yeah. These were just Instamatic color pictures she had taken of her clients. And an Instamatic was a cheap, ubiquitous consumer camera. It strips away all professional gloss.
No fancy lighting, just a raw flash.
Exactly. These weren't sexual pictures either. They were just ordinary guys sitting on beds in cheap motel rooms.
And Arbus vividly recalls one specific photograph from that album. A man wearing a bra.
She describes him as the most ordinary, milquetoast sort of man. And he was just sitting there trying it on.
Her empathy in describing this is so striking.
It really is. She says, like, anybody would try on a bra. Like, anybody would try on what the other person had that he didn't have. She didn't find it scandalous or humorous at all. She called it a heartbreaking fact. She called it a really beautiful photograph.
The sheer, unadorned fact of that photograph, the harsh clarity of the Instamatic flash, the undeniable reality that this totally ordinary man sat on a motel bed and allowed this woman to document his private vulnerability, that is what gives the image its immense emotional gravity.
The camera doesn't lie, and the clarity leaves absolutely no room for evasion.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps most mysterious part of her philosophy. Because for someone so utterly obsessed with clarity, exactitude, and facts, she had a shockingly chaotic approach to the actual moment she clicked the shutter.
Oh, this is the best part. It is the great, beautiful paradox of her working method.
It really is.
We tend to think of master artists as having total dictatorial control over their medium. Yet Arbus makes a stunning admission. She says, "I never have taken a picture I've intended. They're always better or worse."
I never have taken a picture I've intended. That is wild.
Most professional photographers would view that statement as a confession of absolute failure. But for Arbus, it was an active embrace of the inevitable accidents that occur when you are dealing with living, breathing reality.
She admits she hated the traditional academic idea of composition. She claimed she didn't even know what good composition was.
Like the rule of thirds and all that.
Exactly. For her, composing an image wasn't about balancing negative space. It was about intuitively feeling her way into what she liked. She said sometimes it had to do with a certain brightness, but other times it had to do with funny mistakes.
She talks about how there is a kind of rightness and a wrongness in an image. Sometimes she liked the rightness, but very often she absolutely loved the wrongness.
There's a wonderful story she shares that perfectly illustrates this love for the wrong image.
Mm.
She was in the darkroom, reviewing some rough prints she had made, and she felt there was something wrong with all of them.
She thought she failed the shoot.
Yeah, she felt she had missed the shot entirely and figured she would just have to go back and reshoot the subject.
But then, amidst all the discards, she noticed one print that was just totally peculiar. She describes it as a terrible dodo of a picture.
A terrible dodo.
Yeah. It was terribly head-on, poorly framed, sort of ugly. She said it looked a little as if the lady's husband had taken it as a snapshot.
And yet, despite it violating every single rule of classical portraiture, she recognized that there was something terrific about it.
Something real.
Yes, she started to like it more and more, until she admits she became secretly nutty about it. It was the mistake, the complete lack of professional polish, that contained the authentic friction she was searching for.
To find those moments, those magical, revealing accidents, she had to exercise an almost superhuman level of patience. She couldn't force a narrative onto her subjects. She had to wait for the narrative to slowly reveal itself.
She cites a Chinese theory to explain this grueling process. She said, you pass through boredom into fascination.
Pass through boredom into fascination. That is incredibly difficult to execute. I mean, our instinct is to abandon ship the second we feel bored.
It requires immense psychological discipline.
Hmm.
She explicitly states that she would never choose a subject because of what it initially meant to her or what she thought the end result would be. She believed you just have to choose a subject, and the meaning begins to unfold organically if you, quote, just plain choose a subject and do it enough.
The text gives an incredible example of this. She is riding her bicycle down 3rd Avenue and sees 2 women on the street. They are almost 6 feet tall and heavy. She initially thinks they might be a couple.
So she just follows them.
Right. She follows them into a diner, strikes up a conversation, and just asks if she can photograph them. They agree, and she ends up tracking them down, going to their house, and discovering this whole complex, unexpected world.
She didn't know what the story was when she saw them on the street.
Yeah.
She just trusted her raw instinct and allowed the fascination to develop through the sheer process of spending time with them.
But let me ask you about the mechanics of this. If her identity as an artist is inescapable, she says it's what's left when you take everything else away, and if invention is just this subtle, inevitable thing, and she's constantly relying on accidents and funny mistakes to get her best work,
Yeah.
is she basically arguing that technique, lighting, mastering the darkroom is all useless compared to just raw instinct? Like, is she advocating for just chaotic, passive pointing and shooting?
Not at all. And that's a vital nuance to grasp. Technique is absolutely essential. She had to spend years learning how to master the developer chemicals, the photographic paper, the precise lighting to get that exact density of flesh and that hyper clarity we discussed earlier.
So she had the skills.
Immense skills. Technique matters immensely. But the key distinction is that the technique must be entirely subservient to the instinct.
It's the servant, not the master.
Exactly. She says that what moves her about technique is that it comes mostly from some very deep choices somebody has made that take a long time and keep haunting them.
That's a haunting way to phrase it.
It is. Technique isn't a cheap trick up your sleeve. It's the physical manifestation of your deepest, most mysterious identity as a creator. You master the clarity, you master the focus, so that when the terrible dodo of an accident finally happens, the resulting image is rendered with absolute, undeniable, factual precision.
So you build the perfect trap, and then you just wait for reality to stumble into it.
That's a perfect summary.
Let's try to pull all of these massive ideas together for the listener. What are the ultimate takeaways from the philosophy of Diane Arbus for anyone trying to truly observe the world?
Well, first, we have to embrace the gap between intention and effect.
Right. When looking at people, don't focus on the mask they are projecting. Look for the exact moment the mask fails, because that twitch is where human vulnerability lives.
Second, seek absolute clarity to expose the truth. Reject the romantic blur, the evasions, and the nicenesses that polite society uses to hide reality.
And third, remember Lisette Model's vital lesson. The more highly specific your details are, the more universally resonant your work will be.
And finally, never be afraid to step into the awkwardness. Instead of trying to aggressively arrange your subject to fit your preconceived notion, arrange yourself.
Endure the discomfort. Pass through the boredom and wait for the true fascination to reveal itself.
It's a profound, uncompromising framework for existing in the world. And, to leave you with one final fascinating thought to mull over, there is a paradox from Arbus's childhood that perfectly encapsulates her lifelong struggle with the concept of truth.
Oh, I remember reading this.
She wrote that when she was a kid, she used to have this intense notion that the minute you said anything, it was no longer true.
That's a really heavy thought for a kid.
It is. She said she had to drop that idea just to stay sane and function in society. But as an adult, she applied a very similar feeling to her photography.
How so?
She felt that the moment a picture is taken, you realize reality is really totally different, and it makes you want to immediately go someplace else to find it anew.
It's like the truth is always moving.
Exactly. So I want to leave you with this question to ponder. In our modern world, where we are absolutely obsessed with capturing every single mundane moment on the cameras in our phones.
We take millions of pictures a day.
Right. Does the act of photographing something actually preserve its truth? Or does the very act of capturing it instantly turn it into a fiction, forcing us to constantly chase the next image?
Wow. That is going to keep me up tonight.
It's a big question.
It really is. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this exploration. We hope this deep dive has given you a completely new lens through which to view your surroundings.
It certainly has for me.
Take a moment today to look at the people around you and maybe even look at yourself in the mirror with just a little more specific clarity. We'll catch you next time.